Our next presenter is a very close friend of mine and former law partner, John Hudson. And he will be speaking about his experience on a very sombering and important topic, especially to lawyers. As everyone knows, and you've seen in the news recently, Tommy Raskin, who's a law student at Harvard and the son of a congressman, died by suicide on December 31st of 2020. And this is the first time that we have addressed this topic in our CLE for the Bar Convention with the Wellness Committee. And I couldn't think of a better person to be speaking to us about it. So John, I'll send it over to you.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes.
All right, great. First off, I thought Will's presentation was fantastic, so I'm delighted you had him, Lindsay, and I'm sure that was informative for everybody. Good morning, folks. Since we're all virtual, I truly have no idea who I'm talking to at this point in time, but I hope it's a good audience because this is an important topic. First off, I want to thank the Young Lawyers Division of the Bar as well as the Wellness Committee for hosting today. I think all of these topics are critical and especially timely given the world in which we currently live. But Lindsay, I want to thank you in particular for reaching out to me and asking me to do this. And ever since we spoke in the fall, I've put a great deal of thought into this and have been looking forward to this day. So thank you. And with that said, let's get going. So the title of my talk is If I Had It to Do Over. And I want to be clear with everybody from the get-go. The perspective I am coming to all of you from is that of someone who, due to God's good graces, have not had any mental health struggles of my own. What I have had is a brother who struggled mightily with depression and addiction over the years for about a 20-year time frame. And so I was a direct witness to those struggles and everything he went through. So the perspective I would encourage everybody to keep in mind, and I hope will be insightful for any others who may not necessarily have experienced depression firsthand, but you have a friend or a loved one who has, and you're looking for some way, any way that you can possibly help them. I want to begin by sharing with you a voicemail that I received on July the 5th of 2016, right around 5:30 in the afternoon. That day, was for the most part a fantastic day. My family, or at least most of my family, was on vacation at Edisto. My oldest son was away at camp. This was his first time going away. He'd been there for 2.5 weeks, and we were looking forward to picking him up in 2 days. And my wife, her folks, and my youngest son had been out on the beach that afternoon. Sunny, hot, just a great summer day. I was able to convince my youngest son to go out and play golf with me that afternoon, which is normally a feat unto itself. But this time there was no arguing. He said he wanted to go, and we went out there and we were playing, having a great time. On the 5th hole of the Edisto golf course, I heard my phone ring. And both my son and I were away from the cart at that point in time, getting ready to hit our shot. So I didn't think much of it. I said, we'll hit these balls and I'll go back and see who it is. So we did that, and I got back over to the cart, and I looked down and I saw that it was a call from Bobby Wilkes. And Bobby had left a voicemail, and this is what that voicemail said.
John, this is Bobby Wilkes, and if you get this message, please give me a call. But anyway, I'll talk to you, and it's an important call. Talk to you later. Bye-bye.
So when I knew that Bobby was calling, my initial thought was something's probably not right. Bobby is a longtime family friend. He is the now retired minister of First Presbyterian Church at the beach. He married my wife and I. He married my sister and her husband. And he and his wife and my folks have long been good friends. They socialize. So there's a relationship there just beyond him being our longtime minister. So I returned the call and I said, Bobby, this is John. And he said, John, do you know where your parents are? I said, they're up in the mountains with Kate and her family. Kate's my sister. And I said, why? And there was a pause. And he says, well, Will has shot himself. And there was another pause on my end. And I then said, is he alive? Knowing what his response was going to be. And he said, no, he's not. So what had started out as a truly great day in, so many respects, all was right with the world, immediately became just truly the worst day of my and my family's life. So the reality was at 5:30 in the afternoon, I learned that my 38-year-old brother, who was recently engaged, had died by suicide. So let me give you a little historical background on how we got to this point. These are some pictures of my family. I grew up, it was just a wonderful childhood. I have lived a very blessed and fortunate life. My whole family has. I mean, we just really did not have much go wrong. We were so fortunate and blessed in that respect. You look up here in this picture in the top left corner, that's my brother and sister together. They're probably sophomores at that point in time. They're twins. I'm the oldest. My sister Kate, she was born first, so she would always let Will know that she was older than he was. He came 14 minutes later. It was right around the high school years for Will when we started to realize there were some signs and symptoms of depression that were starting to appear. Moving along to the right, this is a picture of us on a family vacation. This was out in Jackson Hole. I was in law school at this point in time, and Kate and Will were both in college. Will was, of course, a groomsman in my wedding. Will was a very good athlete. His best sport was tennis. He was a very accomplished tennis player. He won the South Carolina state tournament when he was 18 years old and actually went on to Wofford on a partial tennis scholarship. But his first love was playing the guitar. And you see here in this middle picture on the bottom row, that's Will there in the middle playing. Mac Leaphart, whose name is probably familiar to at least some of you folks who are listening, is there on the right playing, and that is Timmy Davis on the left, who is singing. He would play with those boys as much as he could, but he truly loved it. The picture that you're seeing there is when they were playing at the post-rehearsal dinner party of my sister's wedding. But those guys also did the same thing at my wedding, and that was just something that truly brought Will great joy. And then you look in the picture to the far right, that's our whole family right there. That's me, my wife, and our boys, and my sister, her husband, and their son and daughter. And then up in the top left, you see Will and his then fiance, Nicole, and my mom and dad are in there as well. We were down at Myrtle Beach at the house where I grew up celebrating my mother's 70th birthday there. And that's the last picture we have when we were all together as a family before Will died. So, you look at those pictures and you just see how good things often were and appeared to be. I suspect in many respects, those of you looking at those pictures can probably find many similarities between what you're seeing there and the lives that you all have led. But obviously, as I'm here to describe to you, things changed, and they changed drastically, and they changed on a dime. So let me tell you a little bit about Will's depression. What caused it? The short answer is we do not know, and we probably will never know. It could have been a traumatic event. When he was a freshman in high school, he was involved in a very bad car accident. He was driving the car, and the friend of his who was riding in the front passenger seat was extremely fortunate to have survived it. So that's certainly a plausible cause. It could have been the fact that he lost his tennis scholarship when he was up at Wofford, because he was partying more than he should have been, violated some team rules. And when that happened and that scholarship was revoked, Dad let him know that if he wanted to party as opposed to focusing on tennis and just bearing down, he could transfer to South Carolina and do that for a lot less money. So that's what Will ended up doing. Did substance abuse play a role? I think that's very likely. Will drank a good bit in college and afterwards, but he got to the point in 2013 where he stopped drinking completely and started going to AA regularly and was alcohol free up until the point of his death. Drug abuse. I will believe until the day I die that if Will had not ever been introduced to Adderall, we probably would have had a different outcome. Adderall was a drug that it could do great things for Will, but it could also do terrible things for Will. And understand, this is not an indictment of Adderall at all. I've got plenty of friends whose kids take it. They do well on it. The key from my perspective and my family's perspective is drugs such as Adderall, if they're going to be used, they've got to be used properly and in a compliant fashion and under professional care. And Will was not always great about that. He would absolutely be a non-compliant patient. So even when he started to realize that Adderall was a double-edged sword for him, he would get off of it for a while, but he would eventually find his way back to that substance, and the cycle would continue to repeat itself. He would have these incredible highs when he was doing well, but he would reach the end of his road, and when those highs went to a low, the low would always get a little bit worse than it was before. Did genetics play a role in Will's depression? Perhaps. If you trace our family tree, you can certainly find other family members who have battled with depression to some degree or another. Was it idiopathic? Is there just no known cause for it? Maybe. I think that's probably unlikely. Or was it a combination of all the factors? That's probably the reality of Will's depression. I think a lot of the factors that you see on the screen work together to cause him to experience the condition in the form that he did. The signs and symptoms that manifested in Will were these primarily. When he was in a depressive state, there was a complete inability to get out of bed. He could be in bed for days on end, and there were times when he was in bed for weeks on end. But one of the crazy things about it was when he was in bed, he was usually not sleeping. He would tell you that he was unable to go to sleep. He would at times take medication to try to get some rest. They rarely, if ever, worked. So it was as if he was in this catatonic state, but could not recharge his battery. And he said it was miserable. He would become entirely unreliable when he was going through a bad state. There were several family gatherings over the holidays, whether it was Thanksgiving, Christmas, or Easter, where he said he was planning on coming and he just would not show up. He not only wouldn't show up, he wouldn't call you to tell you why he wasn't showing up through the holiday. And needless to say, that would lead to a lot of family tension and strife and just challenging times. He would tell you that the pain caused by depression was indescribable. And one of the frustrating aspects of that is when you want to know what is so difficult about the pain, he would say, I just cannot tell you. I can't put it into words. You just would not understand is a constant refrain that we all heard from years. There's a profound hopelessness that went along with his depression. When he was in a bad state, he would say he felt like he was never going to get out of it. He felt like he was just resigned in life to having these bouts with depression. And he said, I'm just not hopeful, not hopeful. And there were other signs and symptoms, but these are the primary ones that seem to recur with Will. The treatments that he went through, they pretty much ran the gamut. Anything that was available to the general public, he tried. He saw multiple counselors over the years, multiple therapists. He saw many, many, many psychiatrists. And once he did so, well, that led to medication. Just to be frank with everybody, the medication road was a very challenging one because there was never a consistency of substance. One would cause a certain side effect that would cause the medication to be changed. If Will found one that he felt like was helping him, the efficacy would wear off over some period of time, which would cause the dosage to be adjusted or the medication to be switched. So once he started taking meds, it was just a continual struggle to find one that would work or work for a prolonged period of time. And the reality of Will's frame of mind when he started down the medication road is he wanted to find something that would be a quick fix, that would allow him to deal with his symptoms, deal with the problem, and get back to normal so he could carry on and continue living his life. And when that was not the reality, when there was no easy fix, there was a frustration that tended to mount over the years. And that was always evident with each subsequent depressive episode that he would suffer. He went to rehab for a 3-month period of time, just because we, as his family, we didn't know if it was really a mental health issue, if it was a drug abuse issue, or a combination of the two. But he went through rehab, and aside from any pharmaceutical substances that he took after that stint, he stayed off of drugs, any type of recreational drug. There's no doubt in my mind about that. When he was at his lowest, he was hospitalized for several days, and that hospitalization included ECT treatment, which to me was indicative of the desperate state that he was in. He was searching for anything that may help him get beyond his depression for good. So to transition a little bit, my opinion, and I want to be candid with everybody out there who wears the same legal hat that I do. I think there is a great, great challenge to us as lawyers to deal with the issue of mental health in general. And I think it's a colossal struggle. And I think that is the case for 3 primary reasons. First of all, we're critical thinkers. When we go to law school and start practicing, we're taught to question, never accept things at face value. Always challenge what you're being told. And that makes us skeptical, especially those of us who litigate. And so what you realize is if you want to think critically about mental health issues in general, but depression in particular, you will find endless reasons to question the symptoms that people complain of, the treatments that people try to address those symptoms. There is little consistency to the science that is available for consumption out there. And that causes us to say, well, what should we believe in all of this? Number 2, we're an evidence-based profession. And this ties into number 1. Again, especially for those of you who litigate, our livelihood rises and falls on whether or not we have enough evidence to prove our own case or perhaps disprove our opponent's case. But we gather facts in order to present evidence to the tribunals that we're in front of. And the evidence is all over the board in the mental health realm. That's just the reality. For every potential fact you can find out there, you can find a counterpoint or a counter fact that may negate what you initially thought was factual, which leads to frustration, to be quite frank with you. And the third issue is that I think we as lawyers tend to be problem solvers. We like to fix things. We like to get a case, work it through to conclusion, and then move on to the next one. We don't want to have to keep coming back to that same case that we resolved, a week ago, a year ago, a decade ago, whatever the case was. There is no easy fix for depression. It is not, in my view, a problem. I say my view, I should say my experience, a problem that can be solved once and for all. Reality is it's probably something that's got to be managed over time. And that too can lead to frustration for us lawyers as professionals. So if I could go back in time and do it all over, there are three things that I would do. And this is what I want you all to take away from these remarks today. I would become better informed than I was. And that's not to say that I wasn't somewhat informed once I realized that Will was struggling with something that was real, something that was serious. But I didn't do as much as I wish I would have. What I wish I would have done specifically is read this book, Darkness Visible by William Styron. William Styron, I'm sure that name is familiar to many of you out there. He is one of the great contemporary American writers. He passed away, I believe it was in 2003 or 2006. But Darkness Visible is, as the title indicates, his own memoir of madness. And the book chronicles his own battle with depression. And he describes in very poignant detail how close he came to taking his own life. And as part of the trying to educate yourself process, Styron says this in the book. He says, the psychiatric literature on depression is enormous, with theory after theory concerning the disease's etiology proliferating as richly as theories about death of the dinosaurs or the origin of black holes. The very number of hypotheses is testimony to the malady's all but impenetrable mystery. It's those concluding words that I think aptly describe depression. It's a malady that is all but an impenetrable mystery. So, folks, I cannot recommend this strongly enough. I am begging and pleading with all of you who know anyone who may be struggling with depression, get this book and read it. Because while it will not help you understand depression truly, it will provide you wonderful insight into the nature of the condition, which will be very helpful. And it's a short read. It's less than 100 pages, but every single word in that book has incredible meaning. Number two, and this is related to the first, I would be more empathetic. And you will notice I have got the word sympathetic in parentheses, and that's for a very discrete reason. Based on my experience, if you do not have any firsthand dealing with depression, if you have not suffered it yourself, I don't think I had the ability to truly be sympathetic with someone who is going through that type of struggle. I did not walk a mile in my brother's shoes, thank the good Lord. So I could not truly understand what he was going through. But that's where the empathetic factor goes in. That's where you, although you have not been where they are, you try to understand what they're going through. But there is a great struggle in that, folks, and I wish I had a better bit of insight to give you on that. Because a lot of times there is just kind of a disconnect in the conversation that results, because when you're asking someone with depression, how can I help you, or help me understand what you're going through, the constant refrain that we would get is, you can't understand. I just cannot make you understand what it is that I'm experiencing. And that was true. That was very true. And as Styron points out in Darkness Visible, he says this when talking about depression. He says, the pain of it is quite unimaginable to those who have not suffered it. And it kills in many instances because its anguish can no longer be borne. The prevention of many suicides will continue to be hindered until there is a general awareness of the nature of this pain. So those words are incredibly prophetic, but the challenge therein lies in we, as those who haven't suffered depression, trying to understand more about a condition that is not understandable to us in many respects. So where does that leave us? I think all we can do is raise awareness to others and acknowledge that there will forever be a disconnect between those of us who have not experienced it for whatever the reason may be and those who have, but we can still communicate with one another, talk about it, and try to narrow the gap that does still exist. And along those same lines, again, this is Styron in Darkness Visible. He says, it has to be emphasized that if the pain were readily describable, most of the countless sufferers from this ancient affliction would have been able to confidently depict for their friends and loved ones, even their physicians, some of the actual dimensions of their torment, and perhaps elicit a comprehension that has generally been lacking. Such incomprehension has usually been due not to a failure of sympathy, but to the basic inability of healthy people to imagine a form of torment so alien to everyday experience. That truer words could not have been spoken, in my view, based on my experience and what I saw with my brother. All right, the third and final point I want to leave with you, and to me, this is the most important. I would have been bolder about discussing my brother's condition. I would have encouraged him to have been bolder in discussing it with others. And I would have been bolder with my family, trying to get us all to discuss it with others. We would discuss it amongst ourselves, but there was rarely consensus on, what was going on or what the appropriate course of action or course of treatment was. So it would just lead to, periodic tension and strife. That's just the unpleasant reality of having a family member who's dealing with mental health, like depression, when so little is still unknown. But I firmly believe, now that we are on the other side of Will's passing, that there is incredible healing that can be found in the sharing of one's problems. The shared suffering theme is remarkably apropos here. And here's what Styron says about that in his book. He says, during the summer of my own decline, and by the way, his depressive episode did not set in until he was 60. And he attributed his, at least in part, to his alcoholism. And he quit drinking cold turkey. It was once he did that he started to experience his severe depression. But he says, during the summer of my decline, a close friend of mine was hospitalized for severe manic depression. By the time I had commenced my autumnal plunge, my friend had recovered, largely due to lithium, but also to psychotherapy in the aftermath. And we were in touch by telephone every day. His support was untiring and priceless. The help he gave me, he later said, had been a continuing therapy for him, thus demonstrating that if nothing else, the disease engenders lasting fellowship. And I think that's true. Those who are in the throes of depression, or those who have been there and come out of the other side, they have a remarkable ability, a gift to help others who are walking that same road, experiencing that same condition. And that gives me great hope that if we as a society will start talking about it more, people will feel more comfortable in doing that. We will start to lose some of the stigma that goes along with saying, I have depression, or I have bipolar disorder, or whatever the label of the day may be. Because chances are, if you tell enough people that, the response you're going to get is, man, me too. Or really, my sister has it. My brother has it. And then what you have is an open dialogue. So people can share their stories. They can share what they've done that's worked, what they've done that hasn't. And that's how we make true progress. But you also realize we're all flawed. We all struggle with something. And just because we're lawyers with a fancy degree, that does not make us or our family members immune to any of these maladies or afflictions that are out there. And I will say this. I think this was true before the pandemic set in, but even more so since the pandemic. I do see much progress being made. You can go to any number of social media platforms, whether it be Facebook or LinkedIn. You see people talking about this more. You see people sharing their story more, whether it be just friends you may know, whether it be lawyers, whether it be doctors, whether it be pro athletes. I've noticed several pro athletes have become more vocal about their own experiences with depression, which I think is a great thing. My family was not always great about talking about it like I wish we would have, but I tell you that with the benefit of hindsight. And one anecdote I do want to share with you, and that this is just tough for me to get through, but this speaks to how sinister the disease is. Will generally did not want people to know that he had depression for the longest time because he felt like it made him look defective or inferior. And he just didn't want others, especially his professional colleagues. He sold commercial real estate, to know what was going on, which I understand. It makes complete sense. I think I would have taken the same stance if I had been in his shoes. But I was coming back from a deposition up in the Northeast. This was in 2017, and I was in the Charlotte airport. I was going down the econ course trying to catch my flight to come back to Columbia. And there was a guy who was walking towards me. I had my earbuds in, and we just kind of locked eyes. And I noticed as he got right beside me, he kind of stopped and just held his hand out. And so I stopped and I popped my earbud out. And he said, hey, are you Will Hudson's brother? I said, yeah. I said, did you know him? He said, well, he said, I did. My name is Chris so-and-so. He said, and I was at the funeral. I recognized you from there. And he said, I just want you to know. He said, I met Will in AA. And he said, your brother saved my life. And so, that, who doesn't want to hear something like that said about a sibling? And that just touched my heart. We hugged, cried right there in the airport. But the reality and the sinister part of something like depression is, I think people who deal with it are so able and good at helping others, but they're not always able to help themselves. And I think by talking about it more, we will change that dynamic to some degree. And to kind of bring this full circle and wrap up. So I took this picture the day after I got the news of Will's death. This was, I had looked for a note around the house that night of July 5 when we got there. And I couldn't find it, but I was just convinced there had to be one. So the next day I went down to his office to see if he might have left one down there. And I found no note, but I found, this bookshelf with this cross on it. And I took this picture and I asked his colleagues in the days moving forward, I said, how long had his office been that clean and how long had that cross been up? And they said he generally kept a pretty clean office and that cross had been up there for a few months. He was pretty engaged in a Bible study he was going to. So do I know that that cross was left there as his. No, I don't. Absolutely do not. Do I choose to believe that it was? Absolutely, I do. But that's one of the brutal things about suicide is it will leave you and your family members with these lingering questions that you just wonder. You wonder what if, and why didn't. So, a little over a year after Will died, just as a family, we realized that this is the reality that we live in, and we've got a decision to make. We can continue to get together and talk about it and turn inward, understanding that that will probably not be good and destroy us, because what you find is there is just incredible redundancy with the questions. The questions are unanswerable in so many respects. Is that what we want to do? Or are we going to find a way to turn outward and to celebrate all that was good about Will, to try to find a way to make a difference and to try to prevent what befell Will from befalling others that are out there? So my family started a foundation in 2019. It's called the Will for Hope Foundation. I would encourage you to go to the website. You can see what we're about. I don't want to use this platform to promote that. That's not the purpose of this, but Will's story is told on the website. Or if you choose not to go there for whatever reason and you know somebody who may be struggling with depression, encourage them to go there and check out Will's story. Or if you want to reach out to me directly, be more than happy to talk to any of you about Will's experience or what we're doing through this foundation. But this is how we chose to memorialize Will's life and to keep his legacy living on, because Will did have a gift for being able to help others, even though he was not able to ultimately help himself. So that is what I have got. I'm happy to answer any questions if any of you have any, but otherwise, Lindsay, I certainly appreciate the opportunity, and I hope there's been something for each and every one of you to take away from this talk.
John, thank you so much for speaking about such an important topic. And there are no questions currently, but I'm sure people will be reaching out to you separately. We did receive in the chat a very hearty thank you for speaking about this and for being vulnerable with us in this moment.